Welcome into a new edition of the Kevin and Jason Show presented by Cover One. I'm one of your hosts today, Kevin Messeri, here with Jason Shannon and Cody Roark of LockedOnBroncos, one of my old friends from my Locked On Bills days. Check them out. They just did a crossover Wednesday edition, Locked On Bills, Joe Marino, over there with Cody and Locked On Broncos. So make sure you check their new edition out. I'm sure it's action-packed, and we're going to bring you some of that same action. We'll go through the Broncos, how they've gotten to the point that they're at. I like some of the stuff that they have on paper, so I'm interested to ask Cody some questions, get into that a little bit, as well as kind of what his thoughts are on the matchup and some future stuff for the Broncos as they're, I'm sure, looking forward to get into the offseason. So, Cody, how are you today?
I'm great. Guys, thank you so much for having me on here. And, I tell you what, the seasons for these two teams, if you would have said, a few months ago that the Bills would be sitting at 7-3, the Broncos maybe at 3-7, I would say the NFL might be of a crazy situation. But now when you take a look at it, that's the reality of it. The Broncos are 3-7, the Bills are 7-3, and they're playing pretty good football as of late. They've had several come from behind wins. Josh Allen continuing to grow in his second year as a pro. So, really I think the storyline is they have a lot of pieces, and this is going to be an interesting matchup for both sides, especially when the Broncos got to go to an Eastern time zone game, which, historically they have struggled.
Yeah, we'll get right into it right in the top. So 3-7, Cody, what's going on over there in Denver? I mean, to me, the team, at least defensively, looks solid, looks really good on paper. Offensively, there's some talent there. I like a lot of pieces of the offensive line, like the running back duo. Is it just quarterback play? What's leading to the 3-7 record right now?
Yeah, it's really tough to kind of pinpoint one specific area where the Broncos may be struggling in terms of their 3-7 record. They've lost a majority of their games outside of the Kansas City game by, 7 or less points. So, the margin of defeat for this team is not that big. They've lost some games late. They've lost about 4 games in the last minute. They've lost 3 games on a last-second field goal, and that was at the beginning part of the season when Joe Flacco was still the quarterback. This Broncos team, they've had the flashes. They've had the displays. Look, they can get back to being a very good football team. The Broncos defense for the first half of the season, for probably the first 4 games, they really struggled a little bit. They weren't looking like themselves. Von Miller wasn't getting to the quarterback. He was still drawing a lot of attention. But the defense has turned into a top defense alongside the Buffalo Bills defense. So the last couple of weeks, things have come back into fruition. And, really, I think both these teams, if I'm not mistaken, sitting at a top 5 NFL defensive ranking in terms of covering the pass, in terms of stopping the run. I believe the Broncos are 11th right now in the NFL. They're working their way up because they were 28th. And, they've pieced it together by some personnel moves. But, a lot of it is a culture change, and you know this as well as I do, especially with the Bills, where Sean McDermott first came in 3 years ago, getting to the playoffs, the wild card his first year, and in the second year, having some of those struggles, and now year 3, they're rolling at 7-3, and I think that Broncos fans don't really understand right now that a culture change, a new head coach in the first year, he may not exactly turn things around, right away. And I think that everyone's gotten to the hype of Sean McVay, where he came in as a first-year young head coach, and all of a sudden, the Rams go from, not competing in the playoffs to winning games and eventually going to a Super Bowl. Well, sometimes good things take time, and I think the Bills are a very good example if we're taking a look at the comparison between two organizations as the model that I think the Broncos may want to follow is a coaching staff and a head coach that is, strict to his philosophy and is trying to make things run from top level down the way that he wants it run. And, that's one thing I've grown to value about Sean McDermott, and I'm really loving that about Vic Fangio.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Vic Fangio, and obviously Sean McDermott is very much a culture guy, a guy that will do things his way. He's turned over pretty much the entire Bills roster, really after 12 months now, 24 months, Cody, as you might be well aware of. But, let's talk about the positives here from the Denver season. I don't think Bills fans, particularly at 7-3, really, even looked at Miami and said that was going to be a W for sure. Ryan Fitzpatrick's playing better. That team's gotten a little bit more out of each other. And they definitely don't look at Denver. They are excited that the game's at home. Some of the things you mentioned with West Coast to East Coast, who knows about the weather, could snow. It's all things that, Bills fans are excited about, but they don't look at this 3-7 Broncos team and say, man, it's a free win. Let's go 8-3. Let's go on to the next one. It's a team that presents challenges. And to me, it's kind of an antithesis of the Bills season where, like you said, it could be really either way, 3-7, 7-3. So where do you see the most positives in the Broncos? Is the running game? Where specifically have you seen a lot of positive play from the Broncos, and that might scare a team like a 7-3 Bills, or even maybe anyone else that they play?
Yeah, I'll probably give one surprise, one positive for each element, each side of the ball for the Broncos here, and I think we could start off with offense. Now, quarterback definitely has not been the area that the Broncos have had success in. I'd say it would go with wide receiver Cortland Sutton, who's entering his second year in the season. Right now, he's third in the NFL in terms of total receiving yards, big play capability. He's evolved his game quite a bit from his rookie season to his sophomore season here in the NFL. He's been a fun guy to watch. He, had Xavier Rhodes all over the field, and Xavier Rhodes was frustrated because he couldn't guard Cortland Sutton, and then the emergence of Tim Patrick coming back as that true number 2 wide receiver for the Broncos, who was activated last week off injured reserve, had a big game alongside Cortland Sutton. So, I think for the Bills defensively, they're going to have 2 receiving matchups, 2 tall, 6-foot plus, 6'3", 6'4" type receivers that they got to figure out how to account for, especially on deep balls, on jump balls, on hitch and curls, out routes, or even the simple dig routes too. And also you have to combine Noah Fant, who's 6 foot plus as well at the tight end position. I would say those might be the positive things for the Broncos there. Finding a quarterback to get them the ball has been a struggle. Brandon Allen's done a really decent job filling in the last couple of weeks, and he's going to continue to do the same thing for now. Defensively, I would have to say, for this Bills team, this might be the toughest test I think that the Bills will face offensively this year. I think the Broncos defense they're finding their rhythm. Now they had a rough week last week when they were up 20-0 at halftime over the Vikings, a very, very tough squad, and they blew that lead. They ended up giving up 27 points in that second half and being outscored 27-3, losing that 27-23 final score. This defense is trying to gel, but they're having fun together. They're young, outside of Von Miller, outside of Chris Harris Jr., outside of Kareem Jackson. This is a young defense, and they have a lot of talent right now, specifically on the D-line. You have a nose tackle. You have Mike Purcell, who's done phenomenal for the Broncos since being placed at that position. That's where the Broncos defense has really started to stop the run, is by placing him at nose tackle in their 3-4 scheme. And then you move Shelby Harris to defensive end over Adam Gotsis, who had his struggles there alongside Derek Wolfe, Von Miller. Bradley Chubb obviously tearing his ACL this season was a big blow, but the Broncos have had some production from undrafted free agent Malik Reed out of Nevada, and he's been a guy that has surprised. I mean, you think about Shaq Barrett leaving the Broncos, going to Tampa Bay, having a big year. Well, Malik Reed is a guy that is fulfilling that same exact role that Shaq Barrett did in Denver. And in the secondary, you have Chris Harris Jr. and Kareem Jackson, and Justin Simmons playing an all-pro type year at the free safety position. So I think that this defense is going to try to get after Josh Allen a little bit. You're going to see Chris Harris Jr. against John Brown. You're going to have to try to slow down Frank Gore a little bit, which the Broncos' run defense has improved so much over the last couple of weeks. They went from 28th to 11th right now in the National Football League. They've shut down some, Dalvin Cook last week. They shut down, Nick Chubb 2 weeks prior, and now they got a Frank Gore who, as long as he's been in the National Football League, I mean, this guy looks like he's 25. He looks like he hasn't lost a step. And so I think it's going to be a challenge for Buffalo, but I think it's going to be a good challenge for the Broncos defense as well, going against Josh Allen, who has a big arm and can hurt you with his legs.
Yeah, I'll jump in here real quick. So I think the Broncos and the Bills have a little bit of a similar situation at cornerback as how it went last week. The Bills obviously have Trey White, who's been rock solid all year. Probably will be shadowing Cortland Sutton, which they hadn't done earlier in the year, but since they played McLaurin and they played OBJ, they have started to do that a little more. On the other side, we have Levi Wallace, who's basically taken all the snaps all year, but Kevin Johnson went and took half of the snaps last week. That might happen again because of the bigger wide receiver situation with Tim Patrick. Last week I saw that Devontae Harris maybe had lost some second half snaps to Isaac Yiadom. I was just wondering what your comment was on that and maybe where you see that playing out in the future.
Yeah, Devontae Harris, he's going to get the start once again at corner. He had a rough week last week, got benched in the second half, as you mentioned. Isaac Yiadom, second, third-year player that has really kind of struggled. I mean, this is a guy that he lost a lot of confidence last season after being thrown in the fire as a rookie, and he had some situations where he was tested this year, and he didn't necessarily always have the support. He had a lot of one-on-one matchups, and he struggled in those matchups, and so his confidence got shot. But Devontae Harris came out of nowhere and has been a spark for this Broncos defense, opposite of Chris Harris Jr. For the last couple of weeks. He had a rough week last week. That's to be expected with a guy who is young, and he's going to get the start once again this week, and I expect him to probably try to bounce back and have a better game. Ed Donatel, Broncos defensive backs coach, secondary coach, also defense coordinator for the title of Vic Fangio. We know Vic Fangio calls the defense, but Ed Donatel's got the title of D coordinator. He's got a lot of confidence in him. I had a chance to speak with him briefly, and he said, he's a young guy. He's going to learn. He's going to be able to piece things together, get back out there on the football field and continue to make plays, because in the NFL, you can't just sit on the sidelines and play scared. You got to go back out there, and you got to get better week in and week out. So Devontae Harris is going to get the start there, and really the Broncos are going to run a lot with the nickel with Duke Dawson at corner, former second-round pick by the New England Patriots. The Broncos had traded for this offseason as well. The biggest story here, Jason and Kevin, is the fact that the Broncos have been without Bryce Callahan all season long. They're not going to get a chance to see what he's going to offer, and they're going to have to wait till next year to do that. So they've had a lot of these young corners step up, and Chris Harris Jr. expected to be a free agent after the season, and so they got to find a way to entice him to stay. And if not, you're going to run into a little bit of a dilemma once the free agency period starts, because now you got to find another corner if Chris Harris Jr. decides to not stay in Denver.
Yeah, I was interested on your take on Dawson, because it was pretty suspicious. We were, Bills fans are normally pretty familiar with the fact that the Patriots are taking a secondary member in the second round just about every year. They clearly gave up on him pretty early. Everybody assumed that it was, a home run pick once Bill Belichick had found him. But what do you think about Duke Dawson now that he was sort of I would say forced into duty at this point? And he's going to be covering Cole Beasley, who isn't going to maybe give you the athletic challenge that a lot of slot receivers do, but he's very shifty. He runs the out routes, the China routes, finds spaces, usually exactly 1 yard past the first down marker. What do you think we're going to see as far as Dawson goes?
Yeah, Duke Dawson, I think you're going to see an aggressive approach, which Vic Fangio has said that he's got to fix a few things in his game, because, I believe it's been 3 weeks in a row he's had critical penalties that have hurt the Broncos. It was a 3rd and 5. There was an out route against the Minnesota Vikings, and he grabbed a little bit of cloth on the out route. It led to a first down, and then after that, the Vikings would go down and score a touchdown. So those kind of mistakes that Duke Dawson, he has to cut out of his game a little bit, and I think you're going to see a lot of pressure from this Broncos defense trying to get after Josh Allen to maybe limit the time that you can have some of those speedy slot receivers maybe extend on the outside or maybe go across the middle of the field. You got to dial up pressure, especially against a guy like Cole Beasley, who, if it's 3rd and short, you got to be looking for either him or John Brown. You got to be able to lock down those guys, and also at the same time, I think the Bills have a ton of weapons too. You look at Dawson Knox, you look at Frank Gore, who on 3rd and short, I expect them to run the ball with him. So I think there's a multitude of matchups here that the Broncos have to be disciplined in. Look for Kareem Jackson to spy Dawson Knox a little bit in this week's matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. Going over to the offense, the thing I see immediately when I look at the injury report is that Ron Leary's on it, Connor McGovern's on it, Dalton Reisner's on it, even Juwan James, who I don't think is featuring much, is on it. How serious of this is an issue, and or should the Bills' defensive line be pinning their ears back, or do you think this is something that they can recover from? Who do you expect to play in this game, and who don't you?
Yeah, those three guys, you mentioned Reisner, you mentioned Leary, and you also mentioned alongside two, you have Connor McGovern at center. All on the injury report 2 days in a row. Wednesday, Thursday did not participate in practice. They're going to return back to practice on Friday. All three of them are expected to play in Sunday's matchup, according to Broncos head coach Vic Fangio. He wanted to give them a little bit of time to recover. Some of them dealing with a little bit of an ankle issue. Ron Leary dealing with a little bit of a shoulder and a back issue. He's a veteran guy, too, so you might want to factor in one of those days considered as a Veterans Day off, not injury-related rest. So those guys are going to be back. They're going to be ready for Sunday's matchup. Juwan James, 50-50 right now. The Broncos have really only had one game with their right tackle, the key free agent acquisition this offseason that they had tried to trade for a couple years ago. They got him back against the Colts, and then he hurt his knee once again. And so, if right now him and Jeff Hireman are 50-50, questionable to play for the second week in a row. And more than likely, I think we'll see Juwan James here maybe in the next week or two back in that lineup for the Broncos. But Elijah Wilkinson's been filling in at right tackle for Juwan James the majority of the season. And, I'd expect maybe the Buffalo Bills to try to counteract a little bit by maybe trying to attack Garrett Bowles, who's had a lot of struggles this year in terms of holding calls. I believe he leads the NFL right now in holding penalties. And the Broncos got to find a way to counteract that and maybe to get the ball to Brandon Allen's hands quickly, which they've been able to do the last couple of weeks. He hasn't been able to take as many sacks, which has been a good counterpit to what we've seen Joe Flacco. I mean, Joe Flacco was taking sack after sack after sack when he was in a quarterback. So having a mobile quarterback can help out with some of the deficiencies that you have in that offensive line to get the ball to your hands quickly, maybe roll out to your right, roll out to your left. But, I'd say his ability to throw the ball quickly, too, to get it out of his hands is going to be beneficial for this Broncos offense against that Bills defense that's very aggressive.
Now, Cody, I'll step back in here for the rest of the injury report. I noticed names like limited participant, Philip Lindsay for both days, and also, not practicing much Tim Patrick, a week after his coming out party. Either those serious, or those, Tim Patrick's not going to be like your veteran, Ron Leary might be. So anything you're concerned with those two injuries?
No. Tim Patrick, he hurt his shoulder on the first catch that he had against Minnesota Vikings last week. Came in, finished the game. He was limited into Thursday's practice, did not participate on Wednesday, more precautionary than anything. So he participated in the wide receiver drills with his position coach on Thursday, and he's expected to be back on the practice field probably full-time on Friday. The Broncos are going to do the final walkthrough tomorrow before heading out to Buffalo on Saturday morning. So really, I have no concern right now, especially with Philip Lindsay. He's kind of been on the injury report here and there, with a little bit of a tweak to the foot or to the wrist. But the Broncos really just kind of being precautious with those guys. They're fine. They're going to be playing on Sunday. I think the only real question that you have for a player that may not play would be the two guys, Juwan James and Jeff Hireman. Outside of that, I think the Broncos are going to be full-on, ready to go with everybody. And, definitely you take a look at the injury report. You want your guys to at least get a couple days of practice in. It's going to be real interesting to see, how they divvy up some of the play reps and the snap counts with some of these guys and who they decide to rotate in if they are, in fact, banged up a little bit more than they're able to go.
Now, I know you just lost Andy Janovich, a guy that you use in your offense. Is that a big loss, and what do we expect from Hireman if he does go or doesn't go? Does that affect the Broncos' offense? Either or of those two guys.
Oh, yeah, Andy Janovich. I would have to say that might be one of the most underrated big-time losses for the Broncos this season is when Andy Janovich dislocated his elbow against the Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings at that point, after he came in, the Broncos offense just seemed to miss a beat there. Their run game kind of slowed down a little bit. Janovich has been the anchor. The Broncos think so highly of him as a fullback. They gave him a 3-year contract extension just probably about a few months ago. So they believe in him, and this was when he was still out with an injury. He had torn his pectoral in the preseason. They used James Beck, who's a tight end, fullback, hybrid type player. They've been plugging him in as that fullback position guy. He actually did a pretty good job the first half of the season when Janovich was out. They're getting him back into the mix this week as well, so expect to see him. And the Broncos just signed Orson Charles to their practice squad and obviously to their active roster at this point. He's probably going to be the third tight end until Jeff Hireman is able to return back on the field. Dealing with the knee injury as well. The Broncos really found some value with Hireman. He's had productivity when he's been healthy, but that's been the biggest question for him. So you're going to see Noah Fant, you're going to see Troy Fumagalli as the number 2 tight end, and you're going to see Orson Charles as the number 3 tight end with James Beck as that fullback position guy fill-in for Andy Janovich.
Yeah, okay. Now, I personally, was I would say a fair, sizable fan of Drew Lock. Is this a guy, I've watched him at your press conferences this week, and Vic Fangio was asked the question about him, if he was going to do any, be the number 2 guy this week or, eventually be the number 1. What's your plan with Lock? When do you expect to see him? Do we expect to see him as QB2 at some point, QB1? What's going on with Lock, and will he take over from Elam at some point this year?
Yeah, the Broncos' original plan with Drew Lock was to sit him the entire 2019 season. They didn't want to get him onto the field. They wanted him to have a whole year to develop and learn behind Joe Flacco. And then Joe Flacco, he got hurt in the regular season. But Drew Lock got hurt against the 49ers in the preseason. He got placed on IR. He had a tendon issue in his right thumb on his throwing hand. So, obviously I think their plan was, we're not going to play Drew Lock anyways in 2019. We got Joe Flacco there, so they brought in Brandon Allen, who they played against in the preseason when he was with the Rams. They signed him. Now he's a starting quarterback. And many people are wondering, okay, well, if you got Brandon Allen in here, and if the Broncos are eliminated from playoff contention officially, I know they're sitting at 7 losses on the season, more than likely a 1% chance they make the playoffs. Very, very rare. Probably not going to happen. But as soon as the Broncos are officially eliminated, a lot of people have been speculating. How come the Broncos don't see what they have with their second-round pick? And look, Drew Lock, back when he was at Mizzou, okay, I graduated from Mizzou. I talked to a lot of people over there. They say he's got, a lot of intangibles Incredible, big arm, but he lacks the consistency to put it all together. Now, I'm eager to see if he can actually come in and do that. Will that be in 2019? Well, right now that's up in the air. It's possible. Some rumors have been floating around that the Broncos plan to activate him next week, and more than likely he can be the backup for Brandon Allen against the LA Chargers. But I think the preliminary timeline to see Drew Lock would probably be the last 2 regular season games of 2019 if he is going to play at all. That is when they're trying to look at it and see what they can get out of their second-round pick. Because, look, the NFL draft's coming up. There are a lot of quarterback prospects in the Broncos. John Elway, he's absolutely in love with a guy from the University of Oregon by the name of Justin Herbert, who would be a perfect fit at the quarterback position in a Rich Scangarello style of offense.
Yeah, I mean, John Elway's got to hit on a quarterback here soon, right? Is that a growing problem there in Denver that people are worried about the quarterback position, or is it something they think they'll get figured out?
You know what? I think ever since Peyton Manning retired, it's been the biggest question mark I think a lot of people have had. And Paxton Lynch was such a reach for going back into the first round to pick him, and he was a guy that was not even close to ready. I think Drew Lock, where he's at right now, was more ready to be a starting quarterback in the league than Paxton Lynch was or ever will be. Now, is that saying much? I don't know necessarily. I have no idea at this point. And people don't really understand. And John Elway gets a lot of heat, and rightfully so. I mean, it's hard to replace Peyton Manning. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, too. I look at when the Patriots, when Tom Brady retires. I look when the New Orleans Saints and Drew Brees retires. I know Teddy Bridgewater did a phenomenal job filling in for him. But when those organizations retire their star quarterback, I really do believe that they're going to go through a similar kind of thing in terms of finding the guy to replace him to be the future quarterback. It's hard. It's really hard to replace a guy that is a Hall of Famer, first ballot guy that's going to be here in the next year or two. I think ultimately, John Elway's biggest criticism is that he has not been able to nail the quarterback position. And, rightfully so, he deserves some criticism in that, but he's put together some really nice drafts the last 2 years. And, he has a chance to maybe knock it out of the park if he goes with the quarterback in round number 1 this year. The Broncos do have about 12 draft picks so far in 2020. They have some ammunition. If they wanted to move up ahead of a team to maybe get a guy like Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow, well, they have the ammunition to do just that. They have about $65 million in cap space as of right now for 2020. That could increase if some guys do not come back. So I think right now the opportunities are endless, but the Broncos certainly cannot go with another bridge gap quarterback like Phillip Rivers. If the Chargers decide to move on from him, you got to go with a guy that's young that could be here for the next 10 to 15 years to kind of counteract what you got in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if there's anyone that knows about quarterback purgatory, it's Bills fans. I mean, we've been waiting since Jim Kelly, my friend, to find the next quarterback, and we're hopeful it's Josh Allen. I mean, he's done some good things, fairly winning records since coming over. He's been a good fourth quarter quarterback. Some stats you may already know. He's been really good in the red zone. Hasn't turned the ball over in the last 5 weeks. He's the best quarterback in the NFL from the 11 to 20 yard range. All things and it says the right stuff too. So all the right stuff here going on in Buffalo. That trust me, it took us, man, I don't know what the total number was, but probably 25 to 30 quarterbacks to even come to this point of a serviceable to above average quarterback right now, and hoping he grows into more. So we understand. And then the Patriots, they took a lot of heat. They traded Jacoby Brissett, who's playing tonight. They traded another quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo, which was said to cause some problems. So we're hoping, trust me, Cody, we're hoping more than anything that New England goes through that quarterback purgatory. And maybe it's time that they do. I mean, it's the clock is closing on Tom Brady.
It's been my entire adulthood, so I'm good with that.
Yeah, I mean, it really has been. And his clock's running out, and somehow the Patriots still decided that they could build the best defense in the NFL. It just doesn't make any sense how that could have happened, but they timed it perfectly. So if you look at this game, Cody, is there something that you see that favors the Broncos? What do you think that happens here? What are you rooting for at this point as your 3-7 season goes on? I always like to ask kind of what you're rooting for. Obviously, are you rooting for a win? Are you rooting for draft position? What do you see on paper with this game? And then kind of from there, as you elaborate, like what's your total opinion on this Bills team? Is it a team that you expect to see as a wild card team competing against the likes of Indy or Houston on wild card weekend?
Yeah, I think that the expectation, what I want to see from this Broncos team the rest of the way, because for me coming into the season, I didn't even believe playoffs was something that they would reach. I don't think that they were attainable to that, especially with being how young as they are at a lot of positions, a lot of inexperience. I want to see them play for their identity going forward. We're seeing bits and pieces of it, and I think for Broncos fans, they always want to win, and it would be nice for the team that you're covering. For me covering the Broncos, it'd be nice for them to win as well. But if they can win and build their identity along the way, I'm happy with wherever they end up, whether it's in the mid 10 to 15 range for a draft pick if they continue to win games, or if it's a top 5 pick or a top 7 pick in this year's upcoming NFL draft. Just keep playing hard. Do not tank, because I hate the philosophy that a lot of teams embrace about, we're not a good team, we're rebuilding, so let's play as poorly as we can to build draft positioning. I've never been a big fan of that. I think it's something that should be banned in sports, but I think for this Broncos team, playing for identity, and I think for this Bills team too, when you're going against this Bills team that's 7-3 right now, I think this is going to be a heavyweight matchup. It's going to be a slugfest. I think it's going to be very physical. I think it's going to be a defensive football game, which I like defensive football. I don't know about you guys. It's one of my favorite things to kind of watch in terms of the sport. I've always been a defensive guy as a player, as a coach, as an analyst. I mean, these are the things that I really love to see. And so I think for this Broncos team against Buffalo, it's going to be a good test. And I think the Broncos have a good chance to be able to come into Buffalo and maybe sneak one on Buffalo if Buffalo is not completely prepared. I think a big matchup I'm looking forward to is seeing Von Miller against the tackles. If I'm not mistaken, one of your tackles got severely hurt in last week's game, and I think as Cody Ford is going to be replacing that guy, I want to see how Von Miller does against him.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. Ty Nsekhe, our veteran right tackle, did go out. They've actually been splitting reps pretty 50-50 or close to it. Cody Ford sometimes comes out with more snaps, so it isn't a total change for us. So they've been actually platooning right tackle, really funny enough. So it is a loss that we're not. So we lost half of a right tackle, but probably to this minute and this point of the season is our better tackle, better player here. Most would agree. A lot of people want to see Cody Ford at guard, but John Feliciano has played really good at guard, so that never came to fruition. We big signing in Morse at center, and then obviously Clinton Spain at left guard, who they've really enjoyed. A lot of their interior has been pretty good. And Dean Dawkins has played well at left tackle at times too. So you are going to get the probably raw Cody Ford here, but we want him to develop. We're sure going to give him help. They paid Lee Smith to be a tight end for this reason. And I know we really, really want to see this matchup too, because Cody Ford needs to develop. We took him pretty high in the second round. We traded up for him. There's videos of our GM holding his breath because we thought that Carolina took him and actually ended up taking Greg Little instead. So we're excited to see Ford, and this is his time that he doesn't have to worry about a guy coming in the next series on him. So it's his turn, and we're hoping we develop a right tackle of the future, and he's shown flashes. So
yeah, I wish it wasn't Von Miller though.
Yeah,
I wish it was anybody else. I wish Von Miller was next season.
Yeah, that couldn't be more true. It's going to be a daunting matchup. But Cody, what's your score prediction in this one? And I guess all things said, we've kind of evaluated the game a little bit. Where do you see this one going?
That's tough. You put me on the spot there.
Sure did.
I think here, if the Broncos are going to win this game, I think it would be a close, maybe a 17-10 type game or a 17-13 type game. The Broncos would have to do it defensively and maybe, capitalize on an offensive drive, punch it in, and, Brandon McManus is going to have to make some field goals. Defense is going to have to hold up. If the Broncos end up losing this game, I think they could lose it to the Bills in a fashion of probably 20-14 in a sense where, the Broncos maybe give up a special teams play or the offense has a turnover that leads to a score. I think the Broncos defense will do enough this week to maybe avoid some of those big plays that Buffalo had shot their way. The Vikings had shot their way. They hope that Josh Allen, his big arm, doesn't capitalize on that as well, especially across the middle of the field. They're going to be taking a look at some of those mismatch opportunities, maybe trying to pick on some of the young corners a little bit. So I'd say it would be, if the Broncos win, it's going to be a score of 17-13. If the Bills win, I think it's going to be probably 20-14 or 17-14 score. Yeah,
I have a 21-17 Bills score. I would be really scared of this game for Buffalo in Denver. Bills have played really well on the road. Side note, they've taken they took advantage of Nashville. Josh Allen was AFC Player of the Week down in Offensive Player of the Week down in
Miami.
last week. So they played really reasonably well on the road. They faltered in the kind of in the Cleveland game, a game that Bills fans would love to have back, and for a lot of reasons. But the team, we'll see what happens at home. They've had a harder home schedule for sure, and they get Baltimore too at home here soon. So Baltimore, they have a pretty big stretch. And it's going to be a challenge. I mean, it starts with Denver. They can't overlook Denver. This game's really important to this team because of the Dallas, Baltimore, New England, Pittsburgh stretch they have here, and they need to take full advantage of that, Cody. So this one's a game I expect them to be fully prepared for. They can't overlook Denver. They really, really need to get that 8th win, and would put them in officially in really prime position to have some faults down the stretch if they do get this 8 win against Denver. We'll see. I mean, it's a hard place to kick in. McManus, I know, has had his struggles, so we're going to see. And then so is Hauschka. So we're going to see what happens in this kicking game, but I do think you're on the right track where that's going to be pretty important. And with these swirling winds, wind advisory up here tomorrow. So it's not going to be great. And then when the wind happens, Cody, it swirls. It is impossible to play. So we might get that defensive. I don't know how much throwing we're going to get depending on what this weather looks like this weekend. So Jason, what do you have as score prediction?
I have a 19-16 Bills win. I'm going with fourth quarter comeback. I think this is going to be another game that's going to be terrible to be at, much like the Miami home game that I was at earlier this year, where you start to think about which language to learn on Sundays and, where's the closest laundromat, because you just don't want to watch football on Sundays anymore. And then they turn it around, and Josh Allen plays a good fourth quarter, and you start to feel a little bit of life as a Bills fan again. And we've grown a little bit since that time. Again, Josh Allen has 5 straight weeks, I believe, of the 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, which is like a list that miraculously since 2012 is like literally Brady, Rodgers, and Wilson. Not to say that he's anywhere within 20 quarterback places of those guys, but that is turning around. I think he's being a little smarter with the ball. That said, I think this is going to be a defensive struggle, and I'm counting on a Broncos team that hasn't scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter in a long time and a quarterback that's pretty good in the fourth quarter. So I will take the ugliest of ugly wins. I'll say 20-16. I don't want to go with 4 field goals and a touchdown. We'll go to 20-16 fourth quarter win.
I think we all have a defensive game here, and field goals could, be important based on this weather. Cody, we're expecting a defensive game here. It's something that, on our end, you're not going to have a Bills. We want offensive games, but we already know what's going to happen here when the third-ranked defense, plays the fourth-ranked defense. We're pretty sure we fairly know what we're in for with this one. So, Cody, really appreciate you coming out. As always, this show is presented by Cover One. Some great premium content, some of the best Bill stuff out there. Check out our other shows, other podcasts, premium content there. You can get our app, Slack groups, fantasy football, the whole 9 yards. Make sure you check out that on the special edition. Cody, give us a final news or nuggets or anything you have around Denver. It could be anything about the Broncos or in general. What are you holding on to over there?
I'd say right now the Broncos looking to get a deal done with free safety Justin Simmons. Their aiming point is hopefully by mid-December. Maybe a little Christmas present for Justin Simmons. Guy's been playing at an all-pro level this season. His contract is up after this year. The Broncos also have some tough decisions to make, too. They want to bring back Derek Wolfe. Will Derek Wolfe take a pay cut? Will he get a veteran minimum? Shelby Harris, they got to pay him as well on the D-line. And you got to pay Chris Harris Jr. as well. So, I'd say right now the Broncos trying to figure out what their next plan of action is. But I'd say ideally right now they're trying to get a deal done with Justin Simmons, and they hope to get it done by season's end. So some news there for the Broncos.
Nice. Some breaking news here on the Kevin and Jason show. That's good. Yeah, there's some defensive players I'm assuming the Broncos are going to lock up. And a little side note, I have Shelby Harris in a really weird, deep sim fantasy football league. I drafted him in a free agent draft. So I'm pretty happy with that
last
pick.
Week, yes.
I'm super happy with that pick. No one wanted him. I took him really late. Now he's definitely going to be rated pretty high and definitely going to be probably starting in my my front 7 here soon. So I have some I love Cortland Sutton. I love the player. I think he's good. I'm excited to see him against Trey White. That is a premier matchup that I don't think anyone's talking about. Well, at least that people that aren't covering this game are talking about. I think that's going to be a good football battle. So check out that one. That's definitely one we're going to key on. Whoever wins that might come down to this game. But really appreciate everyone coming out. Cody, thanks for coming, friend of the show. I know we haven't talked in a couple of years, but check out Cody. Tell us where we can find you and all your work for anyone looking for Broncos material this week.
Yeah, I love what you guys are doing over there at Cover One, too. I know I follow the account on Twitter. If you guys want to follow me on Twitter, at Cody Roark NFL. A lot of people say I sound like Adam Schefter for some reason, so I might do some spoofs coming up here in the next couple of weeks. But Cody Roark NFL on Twitter is where you can follow me. I know I have a lot of Bills fans that actually already follow me, so Bills Mafia is one of the best places to be. Love that they jump through tables before games. They light tables on fire and jump through them. I mean, that is the type of atmosphere I would love to go be part of, just to be able to experience that as a fan of football. And obviously Locked On Broncos every single day, part of the Locked On NFL Network. We have a daily podcast as well, and very excited to jump on here and talk with you, Kevin, and you as well, Jason. Appreciate you guys, and I look forward to speaking to you guys in the future. And obviously, may the best team win on Sunday.
Absolutely.
Good luck.
The Bills need this one, as we've said, but I, sincerely hope they are not overlooking the Broncos. But guys, everyone knows how good the Locked On Network is. That's where we come from. I spent 2 years over there. Jason was in and out of there as well. So the Locked On Network is great. So make sure you check out Cody and all the other great additions over there on the Locked On Network. Really run I think one of the top sports daily shows out there. So check that out. Really appreciate it. Cody, thanks again for coming out from the Kevin and Jason Show. I'm Kevin, and that's Jason.
Thanks, guys.